let me give a quick introduction of our company, right? Our company is, it's not called Fitch Connect, our company is called Fitch Solutions. You see this Fitch Solutions here. So Fitch Solutions, all our information is stored on this platform called Fitch Connect. So on Fitch Connect, you can click on anything that you have access in your license login to get access to all the research. So what is key in your research is the library, Thammasat University has been very kind to all the students. They have subscribed a license that allows you to have global access to all the research around the world. What I mean by that is you will not only have country level research on like Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, or Europe, UK, Brexit, or you also have access to industry level research such as renewables, oil and gas, automobiles, especially now we are, what is the hot topic is electric vehicles. So you have access to all these research at your fingertips. And you can get them from home. So I was thinking in the past when I was still a student doing my projects and all that, I have to go to the library to go and look at all the physical books. And the books are usually quite outdated. Whereas right now, Thammasat University has given you this platform called Fitch Connect where you can have access to all the research and they are all up to date. Every day we publish daily articles, weekly articles, monthly articles, and quarterly articles. So you'll always have access to the freshest and most insightful research. And another point here to note is all our research are in-house, are written by our in-house analysts. We don't outsource, we don't have an outsourced office in India to get the research analysts to write from there and post it on our website. No, all our research is done in-house. We have research analysts sitting in Singapore, sitting in Europe, US, and UK. So, and even Africa, we have research analysts there because we need the research analysts to be closer to the ground so that they have access to the real-time news in order to write up-to-date information. So without further ado, let me jump into the training. One more point is the research that you're reading has the methodology. What is the methodology behind our good research? It's because we have this methodology called connected thinking. The meaning of connected thinking means that the way we write our research, we think of it is in the big picture as well as in the small picture. So for example, what is happening in the oil, let's talk about oil and gas. If something happened in Middle East, let's say there's an explosion right there, and then you said, oh, Middle East is so far away from Asia, from Thailand, so it's not going to affect us. But that's not true. Anything happening in Middle East in the oil and gas production base, it will affect your oil price. It will affect the global economy. It will affect also the importers in APEC that imports the oil into Asia. So our methodology says whenever our research analyst writes, we are using the methodology of connected thinking. We not only have to write about what is in APEC, oil and gas, we have to think about what is happening out there in the world, how it affects APEC, how it affects all the oil prices, and how it affects the movement of oil globally. So that's where the value and the quality of our research comes from, is because of the methodology connected thinking. So in order to have this methodology, it means that our research analyst, even though later you'll meet Peter Lee, who's the oil and gas analyst in Singapore, even though he has to only write APEC oil and gas research, but he also has to talk to all our analysts, oil and gas analysts in UK, US, to talk about what's happening in the global macro level and to see how it will affect Asia. So why I talk so much about the methodology is to ensure and to assure you that the research that you're reading is actually of very high quality, and Thammasat University has paid the license to let you have access to all this quality research to help you in your projects in school. So please make full use of this research. So for now, this is the global search bar that I want you to look at. This is where I always take this like a Google search. Let's say I look at it like I put key in Thailand. So it will find in the research database. On the left hand side, it will say, okay, what are the latest research on Thailand that is available? You can click on it here. You can see at the bottom is what is the headlines. You know, what is the headlines of the latest research we have published. Then in the middle are the entities. So for you is will be more on the country level, because we also have the ratings content here, which is not part of your package. You would be able to see ratings, the ratings itself, but not the rating research report. Then on the right hand side, you will see all the issues that's done by the sovereigns. Let's say your Thai government has already issued some bonds. You can also see some information here. So let's go into Thailand as a sovereign. So remember, in your package is global access. That means you have access to over 200 countries' country risk report. So you even have access to North Korea if you have to do a project on North Korea, political risk, for example. So on the default page of Thailand, this is standard. You see all these tabs like summary, profile, rating, so on and so forth. Your access will allow you to see ratings. So you can also, when you do your research, let's say how stable this government is, or if you want to talk about export into some countries, your business plan, you might want to look at first, is the government safe? So if the better the ratings, of course, better for you to do business in that particular country. So this area is also something that could help you to write in your reports, how strong the country is to pay up their bills. So then you look at the main two tabs for you is the country risk and the industry risk tab. Under the country risk tab, you'll see all the reports related to the country itself. So right now we are in Thailand. So let's say if you put Laos or Cambodia, you'll see Laos here or Cambodia here. The format, the layout is the same, but of course the research will be dependent on the country that you choose. So right now we chose Thailand, so you'll see Thailand policy, the interest rates, and so on and so forth. So you can click on any one of them to read more. I want to draw your attention to this part. Okay, analyst choice means what our Thailand country risk analysts say. These are the most important articles you have to read about the country. So let's say you need to, last minute, you need to finish up this report for submission tomorrow, but you don't have time to read all the thousands of reports that we have over here. So read first these 3 articles here, right? And then next, these are the reports that we publish quarterly or monthly. So country risk report for every country, we published it on a quarterly basis with a 10-year forecast. So this is also very important for your projects, because when you want to do a business plan, you have to talk about not only what is happening, what you're going to do now, you're going to talk about how it's going to bring in profits for you for the next 5 to 10 years. So the country risk with the 10-year forecast is going to help you with your business plans. What is inside our country risk report? Let me make it bigger for you. We always have the same key executive summary, core views, economic risk index, political risk index, SWOT analysis, economic outlook, GDP expenditure outlook, monetary policy, fiscal policy, so on and so forth. And a currency forecast is also here. So you see there's a 10-year forecast is here to talk up to 2029. And political outlook, domestic politics, long-term political outlook. Operational risk, we talk about free trade agreements, we talk about barriers to your foreign direct investments, we talk about your utility network as well. So every country we have this, we've also split up in this kind of format. So this is a key report that I think will be very useful for your research. Okay, it's a total of 73 pages long. So remember, every country we have this, and it's published every quarter. So when you see quarter 1, it means that this has been published sometime in December already. So it's on a forward-looking basis, right? So you have to bear in mind, when did our analysts write this report? So quarter 2 will come out in probably another month's time. We'll see a quarter 2 out already. Okay. The other key reports that I would like you to focus on is also the Emerging Markets Monitor. This is done on a monthly basis. We will pick, our global macro analysts will pick a few emerging countries to talk about what is happening, and also give their own forecast. So you look at Asia, Latin America, Europe, MENA, See, all these are the forecasts that you will see, you know. So this is another key research. It's published every month. We talk about China, talk about vaccine, yeah. The other key research is our Asia Monitor. This will focus on the Southeast Asia countries. So you see, Thailand, it says political instability to re-emerge in 2021. We talk about Myanmar, Laos, so CLMV. So this is also a monthly report. So this is something that's, if you are focusing on Southeast Asia, this is something that you is good to read. See all the forecasts on the GDP forecast going forward. You look at the short-term and long-term risk. Okay. And then other special reports like global macro themes on the pandemic. So please, feel free to click on any of the articles here. And if anytime you want to print it out, there's a print button here. You can just print it out, or you want to download this article into your computer, it's also fine. Unlimited access. Don't worry. Dhammasat University is not paying for every single download. Don't worry. So just download as much as you want. The other thing I want you to look at is there's these few tabs that you can focus on. Analysis are talking about the shorter articles. Like anything that happens like last night, they'll quickly write up a short article to talk about what happened last night. For example, the election, the Mr. Biden's win. Then the next day we have an updated article out to talk about that big news already. So we are that fast. So on the analysis, you'll see the shorter articles. Yeah. On the reports are the actual like 50-page, 70-page articles. So these are the proper reports that our analyst has to abide by a deadline. They must publish this at a certain date, monthly or quarterly. So for example, emerging market FX monthly is something that is also important for you. Let me get the latest one. Because in your business reports, you will need to write about, okay, currency risk. So what if you export out and then the currency exchange rate works against you? So this is also another part. You also would be keen to look at what's the forecast, is the currency going to work in your favor or against you? And if you do your personal trading, this will also help you. Right? The country risk index is also another part, especially if you are talking about a regional business plan. Then you want to talk about how safe or how easy to do business in another country. This would be a place you look. Okay, so click on country risk index. You'll see our country risk index are all so many numbers here, right? So we actually group by year. Is it improving or deproving? And the key is the regional benchmark. So let's say you're exporting to, for example, you want to export something to Laos. So look at Thailand. Thailand is 63.7. So what is Laos? Can I find Laos here? Oh, I can't see it. But let's say you want to maybe export to Turkey. Okay. So you'll see you will compare the numbers. So 63.7, the bigger the number, the better. So Turkey is lower. So that means the risk in operating your business in Turkey is lower. Is higher risk than in Thailand. The full methodology for our country risk index is here on the right hand side. You can click on it and read how do we come up with all these numbers? How robust is our risk numbers? So you'll see we split it in to economic risk, political risk, and operational risk. And within each risk, you also split into different parameters like economic activity, monetary, fiscal position, so on and so forth. So you can go in and read on your own. So one tip for you is even the banks that are our clients worldwide, they also use this in their risk because they need all these numbers to measure their portfolios. How risky are they going to be coming up with non soon? So they use this our country risk index in their risk management process. Okay, so that's about all I'm going to talk about for country risk reports. Before I move on to the industry risk, is there any questions from the floor? Anyone have a question for me regarding country risk? So the good thing about using Fitch Connect is you have the whole breadth of sectors to choose from to get your information. So you can see from my screen, you have agribusiness, autos, banking, and financial services, consumer electronics, consumer and retail, defense and security, food and drink, freight, transport and shipping, information technology, infrastructure, insurance, medical devices, mining, oil and gas, petrochemicals, pharmaceuticals and healthcare, power, real estate, renewables, telecommunications, and tourism. So we cover all 22 sectors, and within each sector, we have a dedicated analyst to write about this sector. On top of the 22 sectors, we have operational risk that talks about if you want to have a business in let's say in Thailand, let's say in Singapore, I want to set up a business in Thailand. So what's the operational risk that I want to look at? I need to look at the transport system. I'll look at the logistics. I'll look at what are the risks, what is the trade procedures. It will be all here. So it's for you to read. So let's maybe choose one sector to look at. Maybe we'll look at pharmaceutical, because we're going to be having a pharmaceutical analyst to come and join us to talk about this sector. So on this page, you will see overview analysis reports and risk reward index, the same as the country risk, except the contents are focused on this particular sector called pharmaceutical and healthcare within Thailand. So let's say this part you choose Cambodia, then this pharmaceutical and healthcare will be talking about Cambodia. So right now we are talking about Thailand pharmaceutical and healthcare. So again, you see, we have a core view, what our analysts view about Thailand pharmaceutical sector. This is our core in-house view. And then all these are the different articles. You can click on any one of them to read. Again, we have an analyst choice. If you have no time, just read what our analysts say is the most important that you should know about this healthcare. So the key reports are here. So again, our Thailand pharmaceutical and healthcare report is published quarterly. So if you click into it, you will see we have is a Q1 report here with a 10-year forecast to 2029. I'll show you the table of contents. Again, we have the SWOT analysis. I think business students love SWOT analysis, so this will this will help you when you talk about industry forecast on pharmaceutical, healthcare, prescription drugs, generic drugs, OTC drugs, so on and so forth, and a regulatory review. We also will talk about the competitive landscape, the company profile of the major pharmaceutical companies in operating in Thailand. Okay, so this again, also the demographic outlook and all the methodologies are here. So you see there's 74 pages here. So thankfully this PDF will allow you to just, allow you to click on any one of them and you just bring you to the direct lead to that particular passage. Okay, so the same with other important reports here that we have. Please go in to read the special report on the worldwide pharmaceutical market outlook. So this one will cover what is happening on a global basis. Okay. So you see there's a lot, 428 pages here. Okay. So this is on the sector research. So again, you have the shorter reports on analysis, the longer reports that we publish monthly or quarterly, and then risk reward index. Okay, so it's the same format for all the other sectors, like for example, food and drink as well. It's the same format, but of course the contents are different. So depending on your projects, what you intend to write on, just find the sector's research here. The other thing, let's say you're on this project for maybe you have to do it for 3 months and you frequently need to look at Thailand food and drink. There's this button here called Create Alert. So what it does is it will actually create an alert to you, send you an email. If you say, send me all the latest research from on Thailand and send it to me every day. You can choose, if you choose real time, that means you get it to your email address like 10, 20 emails a day. You can put it on a daily, and this timing is a GMT timing, so +7 or 8 for Thailand. And once you save it, you will get an email with consolidated links of the research, where you can just click on the links to get the latest research. So you can use this alert button. So how to create alert? Let me just go through again. So we are looking at Thailand right now. Let's say if you choose Vietnam, it will be Vietnam. So just click create alert, create your name, the name of the alert, and then choose research Fitch solutions. This is where all the macro research are. And then click on everything and then save alert. Don't forget to change your delivery time to maybe you want a weekly or daily alert, and then save it. The other part that you can get a research alert is this link here. You can choose research briefings. Research briefings is slightly different from the alerts that we have just now. Research briefings only have these sectors that we have targeted for alerts. What it does is not only give you that link, it also gives you a short write-up, a description of what that research article is talking about. Okay, but we only have these sectors for research briefings. So you can choose global instead of Asia. I'm getting 15 emails a day because of this. So beware what you are taking. Okay, next I wanted to show you how to pull out data, especially when you want to write a business plan. You want to pull out data to substantiate what you are saying in your business plan. You look at data tools, interactive charts. So choose geography or entities. Over here, you can say Thailand. Okay, and over here, there are only 2 parts that you need to look at, which is the macroeconomic tab here, and also the industries tabs here. So macroeconomic, let's say you want to look at GDP numbers, you just have to click the arrow here, and then it will show you all the data that you can actually extract. My internet is a bit slow now, so bear with me. So if I click on GDP in USD and Euro, you'll see it appears here. Then the other part that you will be keen to look at will be industries. For example, you want to talk about pharmaceutical, then you look at your pharmaceuticals here. And then these are all the different parts that we have data that you can actually, download. So maybe talk about diseases, common infectious disease, and these are the data that you can pull out. Okay. I'll take this. So after you choose the data, you can create a line chart or double bar chart, scatter plot chart. Everything that you see here, you can change it and customize it for your presentation. Okay. You can switch between the table and the chart. And then there's a more button here. You can click on the more and you can download the picture or you download Excel into your computer. Okay, so remember data tools, interactive charts is the place where you can pull out data from our research. The 2 more things I'm going to share with you, no, actually 3 more, that I'm going to share with you is the webinar page. Webinar is the a tab that we allow you to see all the archive webinars that we have held, okay, in the past, for you to actually go in there to read. You see there's a play button here. So when you play, the video will play where all the past and the analyst actually has been talking about a particular topic. And within this tab here, you can download the presentation slides into your computer to read the slides as the same as what the analyst is going through. So you can see the range of topics here. You have Latin America, Europe, and APAC macro update. You have emerging markets, key themes, pharmaceutical and healthcare key themes in 2021. Just go into any one of them and play. You'll be able to view it. The next tab, COVID tab. So this is where we actually give you complimentary Fitch rating research that has reference to COVID. So you can actually read anything here for free. It's not part of your package, but you can read it as a complimentary. And then over here is some of the latest articles that we have from the macro research team that talks about COVID. One last thing is, how do I find, let's say we have been looking at Thailand and all the different industries. Let's say I want to look at pharmaceutical, but I want to see across APAC. How do I find it? So you go to sectors. Under sectors, go to pharmaceuticals or any other sectors that you're looking for. And then from here, this is where you look across all countries for that particular sector. So you can look at country analysis, you can look at the regional reports, you can change this to APAC if you want. And then they will show you, okay, pharmaceutical and healthcare reports for APAC or country reports. And select APAC, you see all the different country reports that's been published across the world, and the special reports. So this is where you want to look at one sector across countries. Search would be, how do I search for a particular thing? Let's say I want to look for Thailand. And maybe I want to use drugs as a keyword, generic drugs. So what it does is it will search our entire database to look at Thailand and generic drugs to find you the research that you require. So for example, we have this, then you can click on it and read. And again, from here, you can also download or print out. Okay? Right. I've come to the end of my training. Yeah. Any questions from Thammasat University for me on how to use Fitch Connect? To my three lovely analysts and handsome analysts. There are three with us today. I think that's what everyone is waiting for. Okay, they say they got tired of Faith talking non-stop already. So I'm happy that today we have three analysts today. Let me share the screen. Okay, you can see my screen, yeah? So we have the first analyst that will be speaking on renewables and power, and that will be Dane Low. The second analyst is Peter Lee. He's our senior oil and gas analyst, and also the third analyst is Sakshi Sika, and she's our senior pharmaceutical analyst. So I'll hand on the time over to Dane. Dane, are you there?
Hi, can you guys hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'll just kickstart. Thank you for joining us today. So I will start the presentation by giving some of our global renewable trends for 2021 and going forward. And then Peter will take over from there to cover some of the oil and gas trends. And last but not least, Sakshi will then cover some of the pharmaceuticals trend that we see in Thailand. And if possible, we would like to keep questions like right to the end. So if you have any questions, then you can ask us after we're done presenting our parts. Okay, so without further ado, let me just jump into some of the global renewable trends that we've identified. So we expect to see quite a strong resurgence in renewables capacity and generation growth from 2021 as markets gradually recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. So across 2020, supply chain disruptions, financial headwinds, and interruption of business activity has inevitably resulted in some near-term delays across projects. So these projects will likely be accelerated over the coming quarters and fit into our growth outlook for this year, particularly for those with commercial operation deadlines that will actually affect the amount of subsidies that the projects has received. I do want to stress that despite all of that near-term delays, the non-hydro renewables sector has actually remained largely resilient across 2020, especially when you compare it to some of the other fuel types. We have seen continued double-digit year-on-year growth in both the capacity and generation segments. The renewables project pipeline has also continued to expand, which is testament to the strong growth fundamentals of the sector and could send a positive signal to investors over the longer term. So if you can see on the chart on the left, when overall power demand actually fell in 2020 because of the slowdown in economic activity and etc., most markets across the globe actually chose to cut generation from other sources, and renewables is the only one that has actually still maintained like a positive year-on-year growth, even with all the kind of like headwinds present. So it's quite like a positive signal going forward. Not just that, the pandemic has actually also increased focus around sustainability and concerns about climate change. And in fact, several markets are explicitly focused on what they call a green recovery, and will look to renewables development as a key strategy to support their economies going forward. So for example, we've seen like the European Union's Green Deal, which has various funding mechanisms set to support the green low carbon transition in the power sector with a very strong focus for renewables growth. Besides that, we've also seen announcements of carbon neutrality pledges, not just in the EU, but also quite recently in the region. We've seen China, Japan, South Korea all announcing, carbon neutrality pledges now. So this presents like further upside risk to renewables growth. In addition, we also expect the new Biden administration to impact the sector quite considerably from this year, both within the US as well as globally, because of the significant policy changes. So reducing emissions within the power sector is set to be a key focus for the Biden administration, as well as acting on climate change. Actually, just last week, Biden has already rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement via executive action. And this agreement is going to enter into force into the US again on the February of 19. So this provides actually a very strong boost to efforts, both internationally and within the US, to combat climate change. Domestically speaking, we believe that Biden will restore some of the environmental regulatory protections that were undone by the Trump administration, and also provide more forms of support for projects and technologies which support decarbonization efforts, which is primarily also in renewables. If we look into the global stage, the US is set to enter the global stage for action, which will also impact the kind of developments globally. Beyond just joining the Paris Agreement, the Biden administration actually also aims to make US a leader in global climate-related actions, which we believe will provide an added boost to renewables growth while increasing pressure and presenting risk to thermal power growth around the world. So of some of the significant proposed international climate policies for 2021 and beyond, I just want to highlight two, what I think is a bit more important. The first one being that they are going to work with other nations to hold China accountable to higher environmental standards in their Belt and Road Initiative, which includes curbing the financing of billions of dollars into thermal power projects in Asia as well as in other regions. It's not really clear how they intend to do this specifically, but they did stress that they want to look deeper into it. The second one being that the US will end financing of carbon-intensive energy projects, which is primarily in coal-fired power projects within their Overseas Private Investment Corporation, the Export-Import Bank, as well as the US International Development Finance Corporation. So going forward, it just means that it might be slightly more difficult to get financing for, say, coal-fired projects, power projects over the coming years. So if we now refer to the chart on the right, you can see that the red section, which is what represents the share of renewables, it actually is going to expand quite a lot, quite notably over the coming decade, and it's largely eating into the share of thermal generation. So that's kind of where we see trends going forward as markets around the globe start to decarbonize and move towards clean sources. Next slide, please. So amid this robust renewables growth, right, we do think that Asia will actually be the key growth driver and account for more than half of the world's net capacity additions over the coming decade. The region comprises some of the world's largest renewables markets, including China, India, and Japan. And our bullish outlook is underpinned by several supportive factors, including strong government support and a favorable investor environment, which has translated into a robust project pipeline. China will be the largest individual market for growth, as we forecast China to add more than 700 gigawatts of new capacity over the coming decade, which actually makes up about more than 45% of global renewable additions. So you can see in this bubble chart, actually China, which is like the biggest circle, you can see its outsized importance in terms of the amount of new capacity additions as compared to most of the other markets in the world. So if we take a step back from this and we look in terms of technology-wise, this growth will actually be driven by solar developments, given its rapidly falling component costs and its demonstrated viability. So our buoyant outlook for solar capacity growth is supported by the more widespread scope of developments with a greater variety of installations, ranging from small distributed systems to really large-scale facilities. We also highlight the significantly shorter lead times for developments and also the rising efficiencies, which have actually, in fact, driven further cost declines and then spurring further growth. Next slide. So if we look at solar developments in Asia specifically, growth is actually very robust and across many Asian markets. In fact, Asia will be the largest and fastest growing region in terms of solar power, with more capacity installed than the rest of the world combined by the end of 2021. Beyond China, growth in an increasing number of smaller scale markets also contribute to our strong regional outlook for solar. As Chinese solar manufacturers have continued to expand their manufacturing bases outside of China, a local supply chain will further lower the prices for domestic use in these markets. In particular, Southeast Asia is becoming a very attractive destination for these new production facilities, particularly in Malaysia, Vietnam, and Thailand. And these falling technology component costs, coupled with the kind of favorable financial incentives for renewables in many markets, have resulted in a very strong boost to the sector. There is also an increasing number of emerging markets that are leveraging on decentralized solar developments to boost both power supply and electrification rates quickly. And this is supported by the increased access to financing, with a growing number of developers and financial institutions that are competing for access to new renewable projects and basically broadening the geographic base for solar capacity growth. So among the fastest growing solar markets in the region, we highlight India, Taiwan, and Vietnam as some of the bright spots, which will see more than a 100% increase and a considerable amount of capacity added over the coming decade. Next slide. So as renewables continue to grow so strongly across the globe, we do believe that this will go hand in hand with developments in the hydrogen sector. We expect to see growing investment in clean hydrogen production in 2021, with a clear increase in the number of blue and green hydrogen projects emerging over the coming year. So while the production of hydrogen in itself is not new, we see increasing traction in electrolyzer technologies as a carbon-free alternative. So this is also known as green hydrogen, which where hydrogen is actually being produced using clean sources. And so a key driver to the development of green hydrogen projects is actually closely linked to the abundance of cheap, low carbon electricity. And the proliferation of renewable energy and its rapidly falling costs will push the production costs of hydrogen down and drive adoption of the technology. According to broad consensus, the cost of electrolyzers could actually halve and reach market parity with fossil fuel-based hydrogen by the end of this decade, which then makes it a very highly competitive energy alternative. Of course, this is also supported by increasingly stringent emission laws and new demand streams across a number of industries all around the world as part of like an overarching decarbonization drive. A number of green hydrogen targets have already been established, and we note key markets like Australia, Netherlands, Portugal, and Germany being some of those that are taking the lead in driving more research and development into this. I just want to touch like super quickly on blue hydrogen, which is kind of this middle between gray and green hydrogen. It's hydrogen produced from natural gas, but also includes carbon capture storage technologies. And we also expect to see more traction in this coming forward over the coming year. That said, like its high capital and operational costs, necessity for reliable natural gas supplies, and the relatively rare geological conditions necessary for carbon capture storage will make blue hydrogen comparatively less accessible on a global scale than green hydrogen. That said, we do expect both blue and green to projects to accelerate over the coming year. Okay, so now I'll pass the time to Peter, who will cover some of our global oil and gas trends as well. Peter, over to you.
Hello, thank you, Dane. I hope my volume's okay. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes,
Okay, good. I'm using a new microphone, so I just need to check. So before I get to the global oil and gas trends slide, just want to touch a little bit on why all of a sudden I will be talking to you about oil and oil prices. So prices of crude oil, market fundamentals in the global oil and gas is important because it's basically linked with everything that happens in our daily lives. So everything from the way our governments plan annual budgets to the price of fuel for our cars, to the price of inputs that go into industries like power and renewables, like Dane just talked about, petrochemicals, autos, agribusiness. All these things have linkages to oil prices or fuels. Prices of even our daily goods, food, consumer products, everything has a linkage to where crude oil prices go. So especially for a country like Thailand, which is one of the larger crude oil producers and fuel exporter in the region, also a key player in the LNG space, it's quite important, and just wanted to highlight that before I go into the slides. So I'm meant to speak to you about the global oil and gas trends. So here it is. Next slide, please. So what I'll be doing is I'll basically touch on where prices are right now, where it's going, what's happening on the demand and supply side, how's the outlook for capital spending by the regional oil and gas companies looking like for 2021. Okay, so the first slide here, it's titled Oil Market to See a Broad-Based Recovery in 2021. So this is pretty consistent with what Dane just talked about. We're expecting to see wide-based recoveries in the sector, mostly because we are just coming off a 2020 that was very heavily downside pressured by the effects of COVID-19. So average oil prices, if you look at the chart on the left side, we're expecting oil prices this year to be higher than what it was last year. So on an average basis, we're calling it at about $53 per barrel in 2021 from about 42.7 last year. But obviously the risks are to the downside large and growing because of the unpredictable nature of COVID-19 in certain countries, etc. Okay, but the price recovery, which we expect to see still materialize, will be driven in part by a very bullish demand rebound story. Okay, the obvious key in this will be the distribution of effective COVID-19 vaccines, which will allow economies and industries to return to their normal lives, lift restrictions, and slowly return to where we were prior to the pandemic. So if you look at the chart on the right side, we expect the rebound in global fuel demand will be quite sharp and strong this year. So we're expecting growth to come in at about 4.9% this year, after falling by about 4.1% last year. So quite a sharp rebound we're expecting there. As I mentioned, risks are to the downside, as we're fully aware, key markets across the US, Europe, even Asia are still struggling to contain still rising infection rates. I think back home, South Korea, we're having quite terrible times with infection rates still. The upcoming Chinese New Year holiday, which is in mid-February, is a key sort of period to watch for me, because as we've seen in nearby countries and also end of the year holidays, when people move around more, the number of infections tend to rise. So this is a potential sort of near-term bearish trigger for oil prices, if you can call it that. Okay. That said, COVID-19 vaccine approvals and scheduled deliveries are slowly but surely accelerating. So the nature and pace of how the vaccines are distributed across countries will not be even though the general consensus across the countries seem to be, first batches arriving at or around Q2 2021, and remainder of the population being vaccinated somewhere down the line in the second half of this year or even early next year. So this means that probably the recoveries in the developed markets and the wealthier countries will be faster compared to the emerging markets, which in turn would mean that the recoveries in fuel demand, economic growth in the emerging markets in the next 12 to 24 months could be slower compared to the DMs. So obviously, we're expecting to see a year of very high level of volatility, uncertainties, risks of more infection waves possibly, but on the whole, if we're just looking at oil prices, we're expecting it to be a better year than compared to the last one. Next slide. Thank you. Yeah, okay, so we talked about oil demand just now, so turning our attention to where the supply side is like. So this chart, or this slide, is titled OPEC Plus Management to Continue, but Risks Growing. So over the last 2-3 years, we've seen OPEC Plus emerge as a group. So what they've been doing is they've been managing global output so as to lend support to the global crude oil prices. And we expect this to continue over the coming months and quarters, because given a market with plentiful supply, very low demand, it's really crucial for them to continue to lend support to the market however they can. Okay. So the outlook for the supply side does look a little bit more mixed compared to demand. There's still a lot of cloud hanging over where OPEC Plus's actions will go moving forward. They've generally kept the pledge to manage output intact. So if you recall back to December last year, after agreeing to raise production by what was less than what the market expected by around 500,000 barrels per day, the group has changed policy so as to meet every month, and they will basically meet every month to review whether they need to continue on the output cuts or not. So the latest meeting, which was held in January first week, was also not without problems. What stood out from the meeting was that there was a very large and growing signs of disputes within the group. Basically, Saudi Arabia again having to volunteer to make extra output cuts, while everyone else basically either stood their ground or were divided among one another on how much they were willing to cut or not at all. Now, moving forward, OPEC Plus's action will continue to be guided by where oil prices are at that particular moment of the meeting, how's the demand like, and what's the sentiment like in the market going forward. Given the current market condition, where we still see demand growth outlook across key markets in quite shaky shapes due to elevated infections, we still think that it's in OPEC Plus's best interest to continue managing output for the time being, so as to avert a potential crash in prices. But to be sure, even discounting the significant overcompliance with Saudi, OPEC has been generally good in terms of their compliance to the target. So if you look at the right or the left side chart, which shows the compliance level to the amount of output they agreed to cut each month, it's been at about or above or at about 100% since June 2020, which means that generally they have been doing their part in controlling the output levels. But again, the level of dissent that we're continuing to see emerge within the group remains a concern and could potentially come to affect how effective the group turns out to be in making future oil market related decisions later down the line. Okay. Looking outside of OPEC Plus, global oil production growth is expected to return to 2019 pre-pandemic levels, not this year, but probably sometime next year. This is because we expect the market to take some time to find support from continued OPEC action and also rebounding demand, which we expect will be stronger in the second half of this year. So the right chart here shows our expectation for how supply growth is going to be outside of the OPEC Plus. So peaking in 2022, a large part of it due to the strong production growth outside of non-OPEC countries like Brazil, Guyana, Mexico, and stuff. The start of the Biden presidency in the U.S., in our view, implies some near-term headwinds for U.S. shale, as he seems to be sort of like the very pro-environmental president. He's not willing to let U.S. shale expand as fast as before, which is why we think U.S. shale growth will peak in 2022 and then see a slow growth thereafter, because we expect more headwinds, more stringent criteria for U.S. firms to grow under Joe Biden. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, if I'm not wrong, this is the final slide, so hang with me here. So this is a slide where I talk about the Capex trends. So we think oil and gas Capex will be stronger this year compared to last. The stronger oil prices will be one of the reasons why we think this will happen. So as you look at the left side chart, the 15 oil and gas companies that we track in the region, which is basically most of the region's state oil or state-owned enterprises, including PTT, we think all these 15 firms will expect to spend about 12% more in Capex, or about $108 billion more this year compared to what they spent last year. And investments across the region we think will be led by the state-owned enterprises, which together account for about 87% of the total oil and gas spending in Asia. In particular, we think spending by the Chinese SOEs will be quite strong, because they have very strong call from the government to boost production and exploration through whatever means necessary, and also to boost activities in the domestic oil fields, offshore, and such, to basically cut down the dependence on imports. The outlook's also positive for the rest of Asia state-owned enterprises like PTT, Petronas, Pertamina, etc. Although we expect these firms to be slightly more cautious in comparison in raising their capital spending until market conditions stabilize to a greater extent. But overall, we're still quite positive. We expect spending to rebound. The right side chart here basically shows how we expect the Capex will be distributed across segments by farm. So what this shows is that the bulk of the Capex in 2021 will be spent in the upstream sector. I think this is no surprise given that production cost in Asia has been rising steadily over the past few years. But it's also indicative of the rising cost of restarting production and maintaining production from fields that are becoming older and older, while new exploration and new production activities take a backseat in the face of greater market and price volatilities. That said, there's a large pipeline of projects in the pipeline, mostly natural gas, whose deadlines are pushed back. We're still waiting for final investment decisions due to COVID-related disruptions. The pipeline of these paused projects, I want to call it, is large enough that if they were to resume production, or if they were to be brought online sometime within the next couple of years. They're large enough to provide support to Asia's overall oil and gas output levels in the near term. So once stability is restored in the market, we expect some of these projects in the pipeline to be rolled off, thereby providing some positive momentum for oil and gas prices or oil and gas production levels. Okay. The outlook for downstream side is also bright. Interest is certainly growing in this area as well. So more of Asia's emerging markets, like Vietnam, like Thailand, like Indonesia, are looking at ways that they can cut down dependence on imports moving forward, while also striving to move up the downstream value chain. And all these are expected to lead to investments in new refining capacities over the next 3 to 4 years. Okay. We expect to see the construction of larger, more modern refineries with diverse oil product offerings, also petrochemical plants in countries like China, India, Malaysia, Vietnam, for instance, which in turn will force the old and less capable plants to close down or consolidate. Many of these plants tend to be located at very mature or remote places like Australia, Philippines, for example. We've already seen announcements that refineries in Philippines, Singapore, New Zealand, all these countries will close because they just simply cannot compete. In addition, we expect to see, like Dane mentioned before, greater attention given to low carbon clean energy initiatives. So this will be a byproduct of growing calls on the governments and the companies from consumers and investors for more climate action. So as fossil fuel demand basically collapsed last year, it made it easier for the companies and governments to basically look outside of oil and gas and look at ways to sort of diversify their business a bit, gauge the impact of a very heavy dependence on fossil fuels. So all these resulted in renewed focus on low carbon initiatives, emissions cuts, etc. So Europe, US, and North Asia are leading this effort. We saw China, South Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, even New Zealand pledge to go net zero carbon emissions by 2050, 2016 China's case. And we expect more companies and governments could join them down the line as this focus on emissions cuts and low carbon initiatives grow. Okay? So we expect this to be a persisting theme through not only 2021, but beyond as well, with more set to join in. Corporate strategies or company strategies and project funding will also come to be affected. Fossil fuel projects like those based on oil and gas will continue to lose their shine in favor of renewables, hydrogen projects, EVs, etc. Okay? We expect to see more oil and gas companies diversify into non-traditional, non-oil businesses. Again, power generation, renewables, hydrogen are some of the business areas that all these companies are expressing interest in. Natural gas, between oil and gas, looks the safer bet in the near term because of its clean burning nature and less pollutive nature and so on. Okay, I think that's the final slide I have. Can you check? Right, okay, so that brings an end to the oil and gas portion. Next is pharmaceuticals, prepared by my colleague Sakshi. So we're putting off the questions till the end, so let me pass on the presentation to Sakshi. Here you go.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. So to get started on the healthcare section, I want to do a quick lay of the land just so that we can get situated. Next slide, please. So Southeast Asia is a very disparate healthcare market. You have Singapore on one end that offers a somewhat gold standard in how healthcare is accessible to the population. And then you have Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia on the other hand, which have a faulty record in ensuring that the population has adequate health coverage. And these countries are what we classify as underdeveloped greenfield markets where they are working towards developing a universal healthcare program. And we've seen some baby steps along the way to sort of expand healthcare. Now, Laos, for instance, has a more robust universal healthcare program as compared to, say, Myanmar and Cambodia, which are still in its infancy. So overall efforts are underway to expand healthcare coverage in these frontier markets, and health outcomes have improved drastically over the last 10 to 20 years in terms of infant and maternal mortality rates and even immunization records. But the key challenges that now these countries are facing is consolidating the disparate healthcare schemes to a single harmonized health system in order to reduce the financial catastrophe of healthcare burden. Another bucket of countries that we look at are the high growth markets. So these are the countries that have rolled out a universal healthcare program, or they have a program which is in the works. This includes countries like Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, that currently have healthcare plans which cover a significant proportion of the population, but the coverage could be both deeper and wider. So these countries have made great strides in improving the enrollment rate and health access rates in the last 10 to 15 years. But the challenges now are the poorly distributed and overburdened health facilities that are located within its borders. And then the last bucket of countries are the maturing or the mature healthcare markets of Thailand and Malaysia, which have pretty much achieved universal healthcare coverage, but there are parts of the population that still do fall out, but it's only like 1 to 2%. So in these markets, the population definitely has good quality, affordable healthcare and a strong primary healthcare system, which is accessible to the majority of the population. But then again, the key challenges these countries are facing are the continued financing issues, because we see a rise in health expectancy and a rise in chronic diseases, which is increasing the healthcare costs. Next, I want to quickly touch on the models of financing across the region. As you can see, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar are primarily out-of-pocket markets. And what this means is that there is high financial burden because of the high healthcare costs. There is very little social support, and a lot of the other, which is highlighted in red on the bar chart, is actually through donations. What's interesting are the countries like Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines that are looking to expand healthcare coverage even further. And what we see here is that these countries are expanding social health insurance programs, and they're trying to move away from a purely taxation-based system, which we see in Thailand, for example. Next slide, please. Now, if we deep dive into Thailand's healthcare market, pre-COVID-19, there were already challenges that the universal healthcare program was facing. So financial stability, as I've mentioned before, is one of the biggest issues, as budget deficits are prominent in the country just because of rising demand for healthcare services that comes with an increased life expectancy and higher burden of chronic diseases like cancer. Next challenge is difficulty in paying premiums. So there is a reluctance in paying for premiums in Thailand, especially in the informal sector. And now the loss of livelihoods because of the COVID-19 pandemic will further impact this. Another challenge is with regards to payouts, that is the delayed reimbursement, which is paid out from the government, which means that a therapy, for example, might have been delivered, say, 6 months ago, but the payment from the government to the healthcare provider only comes in, for example, today. So this sort of creates a financial hardship for the healthcare providers. And then doctors obviously may have less incentive to provide quality care and spend less time per patient to keep their own healthcare costs down. So with these limitations already in place, along with the impact of COVID-19, we believe that the challenges will be further aggravated. So in countries like Thailand, there is a high traction in achieving 100% universal healthcare coverage. So we do expect a significant derailment of the plans going forward. And the health cost of COVID-19 testing and treatment will further cause a budget deficit in Thailand. And we believe as a result, high out-of-pocket costs will remain. And in Thailand, what we saw is that funds were diverted from the Universal Healthcare Plan to COVID-19 relief last year. And this stretched an already constrained healthcare budget, which will have ramifications going forward when we consider how sustainable the financing of the healthcare program will be. If we now consider the chart on the right-hand side of the slide, so the public healthcare expenditure did increase as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, which you can see from the uptick in our forecast for the year 2020. And what prompted us to sort of revise our public healthcare spending forecast for last year was the fact that the Thai government actually approved a fiscal package which amounted close to 9.6% of GDP. And this included increase in health-related spending. So the National Health Security Office also listed COVID-19 under the Universal Health Coverage Plan, and they are also planning to provide COVID-19 vaccinations for free. And lastly, the government also approved a big budget of $31 million to sort of support the public hospitals to fight the COVID-19 infection. But that said, we do believe that going forward, the slowdown in economic growth and the economic challenges will reverse this dynamic in subsequent years. And we believe that over the coming years, the government will reassess the public funds that are allocated to the Universal Healthcare Plan. There could be new budget restrictions and even lower healthcare spending in the medium term, which will then further challenge the sustainability of the Universal Healthcare Plan. Next slide, please. So we believe that Thailand will remain a key pharmaceutical market for multinational drug makers in the Southeast Asia region. And the Thai authorities recently selected the healthcare sector as one of the 10 key industries to grow. And the authorities also decided to abolish any exclusive drug supply privileges that were previously granted to the state-owned companies, especially the government pharmaceutical organization. And the Thai government is also granting incentives to pharma investors and companies engaged in the manufacturing of active pharmaceutical ingredients, which are the key pharma raw materials. And these companies are now eligible for tax holidays and also for a range of non-tax benefits. So in 2020, Thailand's per capita spending on pharmaceuticals was around $49, which positions it relatively favorably when we compare it to the rest of the Southeast Asian countries. And also the country's overall pharmaceutical market size reached a value of around $3 billion in 2020. And this you can see from the chart on the left-hand side of the slide. So what this means is that the local pharmaceutical production is large in the country and fairly developed. And now if we consider the chart on the right-hand side of the slide, while we expect an increase in our pharma spending forecast for 2021, given that Thailand will have to spend heavily on the new treatments as well as the COVID-19 vaccines, but the pace of the long-term growth will still be tempered by fiscal consolidation and the need for a more restrained government spending, as I mentioned earlier. And this will accelerate the trend of medicine cost containment. Also, with the rising demand for and the consumption of drugs, the government will actually face sustainability issues in ensuring the population's access to medicines in a cost-effective manner. And like I said earlier, particularly because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting economic challenges, there will be a greater drive towards austerity as the country's economy recovers. And this, we believe, will lead to a greater emphasis on low-cost generic medicines as well as biosimilars to sort of enable wider accessibility of medicines. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. Over to you, Faith, for any concluding remarks.
Thank you, Sakshi. So we have come to the end of our presentations today. Thank you for your time here. We also thanks to the three analysts, Dane, Sakshi, and Peter. Thank you very much for your time to share your insights to all these sectors. So I just want to stress again that our research, we have in-house analysts writing full-time and researching on all these before they present it to you and published it on Fitch Connect. So do make full use of your logins and look at all these research articles that we published. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know now with regards to the three topics we have touched on. Otherwise, you can also email it to me and then I'll have them to respond back to you by email. Any questions from Thammasat University over the three topics that we touched on today?
ค่ะตอนนี้จะแจ้งผู้เข้าร่วมประชุมนะคะคือตอนนี้สามารถทดลองเข้าใช้ Fit Connect ได้แล้วนะคะโดยเข้าได้ทางลิงก์ที่ส่งให้ในเมสเสจเลยหรือว่าเข้าที่หน้าเว็บไซต์หอสมุดก็ได้ค่ะในส่วนนี้ค่ะถ้ามีคำถามสามารถเปิดไมค์พูดหรือว่าพิมพ์เข้ามาในแชทได้เลยนะคะ So Faith, now we can log into the Fitch Connect now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after they're logged in, is there any particular questions that they have regarding Fitch Connect that I can go through now?
I think they have no question now.
Okay, so if they do have questions, can you help me to consolidate and send it to me by email and I can respond back. And I'll also send you the slides, right? I'll send you the slides so that you can redistribute it within your group.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, then I guess we have come to the end of our presentation today. So I thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Right? So have a good day and
Thank you
stay
so
safe
much.
in Thailand.
Thank you, Faith.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.